Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to my Back to Basics series. This recipe is close to my heart for a couple of reasons. Number one, apple crumble is #1 dessert in England, so I thought I'd put a twist on it. But also, it's mine and my boyfriend's favourite dessert. Well, at least that's what I thought. It turns out he actually meant apple pie, not apple crumble. And so rather than having our differences, we decided that wouldn't it be amazing to combine the two desserts? And so here we are making an apple crumble pie. So I'm going to start off with my sweet pastry, and this is going to be the base of this pie. First, I have some extremely soft butter in my bowl, which I'm just going to start beating with a spatula. Now you can do this in a mixer, but you can also do it by hand, hence why I wanted the butter extremely soft. Now I'm going to add my sugar and beat the two together. And as I beat the sugar into the butter, it's going to get creamier. I'm going to change to a whisk so I can incorporate even more air, and you'll be able to see the butter and sugar getting even more fluffy and light. Now I can add my egg, but just before I'm going to break it up with a fork and then add it to the butter and sugar so it can mix in easier. Now when you add egg to butter and sugar, it can curdle, but that's absolutely fine because we're going to bring it back together with flour. However, if it does curdle quite a lot, you can go in with a little amount of flour just to bring it together first. So now that's nice and smooth, I can go in with the remaining flour, and I'm also going to flavour this pastry with a little bit of lemon zest, which I really think adds a little kick to it, and of course some flavour too. I'm going to fold in the flour using my spatula until the dough is formed. So it takes a couple of minutes for all the ingredients to combine, but you can see that the dough is formed but still extremely soft. I'm going to outturn the pastry onto my surface and gather it together. I want to make sure that all the butter is completely incorporated because I don't want any lumps of butter in there. So with the heel of my hand, I'm going to knead the dough. This process is called freezing the dough. I think it's a French term, but you're basically spreading it onto the surface and making sure all the butter is mixed in. You don't want to overwork the pastry, otherwise it can get tough, so I'll only do this a couple of times. I'm then going to bring it back together using a scraper so I can get everything off my surface and wrap it in cling film because this is going to go into the fridge to firm up before I roll out. Whenever you're placing something in the fridge to cool, it's best to push it out flat so it can chill evenly. Otherwise just the outside will chill and the inside won't. So this is going to go in the fridge for a good half an hour. So while I'm waiting for my pastry to firm up, I can prepare my apple filling. If you've ever worked with apples before, you may realise that they can get brown very easily. So I've prepared myself a bowl of water with a squeeze of lemon juice. The acid from the lemon will prevent the apples from going brown, so I always like having this next to me. I'm using 2 green eating apples. Some people like using cooking apples if they prefer a little bit more tartness, and then can balance it out by adding more sugar. But I prefer just using eating apples because I know they're sweet enough to eat. I'm going to peel one and then put that straight into the bowl while I peel the other, just to preserve the apple as much as possible. Once peeled, I'm going to cut them up and dice them. It's kind of up to you how large or small you cut the apples. Some people prefer larger chunks of apple or smaller chunks, so I'm doing a medium size. And I'm going to put the chunks straight into the water so they don't brown. I've got a large pan here on a medium heat, and I'm going to add a generous amount of butter, about 50 grams or so, and let that melt. Now the trick to an amazing apple filling is to get different textures of apple. So even though the apples cook when you bake the whole apple crumble or tart or whatever you're making in the oven, I prefer cooking some off first so you get some softer pieces as well as some crunchy ones. So I'm going to start off by adding half of the apple cubes. I've also got some of my vanilla powder to add some flavour and a spoonful of cinnamon. Mix that all together and let it cook over the medium heat for a few minutes. Depending on how large or small you've cut your apples depends on the cooking time. You're looking for the pieces to start getting soft around the outside. When they're just starting to get soft is when I like to add the remaining apple. So once again, I've got half of the apple getting soft already, and then the other half which will stay a little bit crunchier. I don't need to add more flavour here, I'll just mix it all together. So this is where you can get creative with your filling. You can either leave it just apple or add some fruit like I'm going to do. So I've got some frozen blueberries here, which will add to the flavour, add some tartness, but also add to the colour. So as I'm mixing it together, firstly, obviously the blueberries will defrost, but their juices will also release, and this beautiful purple colour will develop too. Overall, the apples have been on here for only about 5 minutes. I think that's more than enough because once again, this pie is going to go in the oven and they'll soften up even more. I'm just going to transfer this filling into a bowl and allow it to cool while I prepare the pastry case. So it's been about half an hour and now it's time to roll out my pastry. The reason why I love working with this pastry so much is because you can roll it out really thin. So just like with rolling anything out, I'm going to lightly flour my surface as well as the dough itself. When I roll out, I want to keep a circular shape as it will help lining the tart tin. I keep moving the dough around on the flour to make sure it doesn't stick. I can also flip it and turn it to keep it moving. I'm keeping the pressure on my hands even to maintain a flat surface. Now bear in mind, this pastry does get soft, especially when you roll it out thinly, so careful when you flip it. Mine actually ripped a bit, but luckily it was only the corner. So just a couple more rolls with a rolling pin, I've managed to fix it. I'm actually going to use a perforated tart ring here. So these rings are amazing because you don't actually have to add the baking beans when you blind bake the pastry, because of the little holes around the outside. You can obviously make it in any tart tin that you have. So to line this pastry case, it's a little bit of a different technique. Firstly, I'm going to roll the pastry back onto the rolling pin because I want to roll it out onto some baking paper. I'm then going to get the tart ring and press it down into the pastry and almost cut out an even circle and remove the excess. And that's how you line the bottom of this tart ring. Now, because the bottom doesn't have any holes, I do need to prick it with a fork to prevent it from rising in the oven when it's cooking. So this is called docking the pastry. And don't hold back. Really poke the pastry because otherwise you'll get areas where it starts to rise in the oven and you want to keep it flat. So I'm going to transfer this onto a baking tray and prepare the sides. So with my leftover pastry, I'm going to re-roll it to the same thickness as I did before, but this time into long strips, because these strips are going to go around the outside of the pastry case. I'm going to cut the strips of pastry a couple of centimeters wide. Doesn't have to be exact because I will trim it after. And to pick up each strip, because it's soft, I'm actually going to roll it up like so, and then I can place it inside the case and unravel it inside. This way the strips of pastry won't break. It doesn't matter if they don't go all the way around because I can always grab another strip and fill in the gaps. Once again, it's a soft pastry, so you can just squash it all together and it will hold. Like with any pastry tin, I'm going to really press the pastry against the sides, especially the bottom corners, to join the sides to the bottom. With a floured piece of dough, I can really push the pastry in without going through the pastry with my fingers because I don't want to break it at this point. I just want to make it tight. Now is the really satisfying part, is trimming the pastry case. So these perforated tins really hold their shape. So I like doing this before the cooking so you can get a cleaner edge. One last pinch around the edges, and then this is going to go into the freezer for 15 minutes to completely firm up. I will then preheat my oven to 180 degrees Celsius, where I'll cook this pastry straight from the freezer for about 15 minutes to blind bake it, just until it's golden brown. After 15 minutes, your pastry case should look something like this. You don't want to cook it any more than this because it will go back in the oven once the filling and crumble topping is on top, but you do want the pastry cooked enough so you do avoid getting one of those famous soggy bottoms, as they say. I'm just going to leave this aside, wait for it to cool, and prepare my crumble topping. So this is a slightly alternative crumble topping. I'm actually going to use ground almonds. So firstly, it adds a little bit more flavour and it also adds more crunch. I'm going to start with some flour in my bowl and add the sugar and ground almonds along with a little bit of cinnamon. The cinnamon's totally optional. I love the taste of cinnamon, especially when it's paired with apple. I'm going to give that a mix so it's fully incorporated and then go in with my butter. Now this butter is straight from the fridge. You don't want this softened because I'm going to go in with my hands and scrunch the butter into the dry ingredients until a sand-like consistency is formed. If the butter is too soft, it's just going to start melting in your hands. That's why it's important to start off with cold butter. So it's nice to have a variation of the size of the crumbs here. So I am going to leave some larger chunks because it will just add to the texture, but that's the crumble ready. And now it's time to fill the pastry case and put it all together. So the pastry case is cooked, and I'm just going to take off the ring to show you how clean this tart ring cooks the pastry, especially on the bottom. I will keep the ring on there just for the cooking, in case there are any overspills of the fruit or crumble. So I'm going to get my fruit filling and start spooning it in. Just be wary of any juices that your fruit may have released. If you put too much liquid on at this point, you're going to get that pastry soggy. So I like using a spoon with holes in to strain out the liquids. I'm going to spread out the fruit so it's an even layer and then go on with my crumble topping. And I'm going to be generous here because I love crumble. And I honestly feel that you can't get enough crumble on top of an apple crumble, or in this case, an apple crumble pie. So I kept my oven at 180 degrees Celsius, and this is going to go in there until the crumble is a golden brown, and this will take about 15 minutes. So when it's cooked, it will look something like this, and I can tell you now, this smelt of heaven. I can smell the cinnamon from the crumble, I can smell the apple inside, but it is hot, especially the filling, so you do have to be patient and let it cool before serving. Now, I probably should have cooked this on a larger tray, but I do have a large cake server, which will help me pick it up and place it onto my serving plate. And of course, I'm gonna have to cut into it and show you what the cross section looks like. And as you can see, thin, crispy pastry, the delicious blueberry and apple filling topped with a crunchy crumble. I think I am in dessert heaven right now. If I haven't convinced you just from this video, then I'm telling you now, go and try this dessert. Now, this dessert was eaten within the first 12 hours of me making it because no one can hold back from it. It was that good. But of course, you can leave it to cool completely and keep it in an airtight container, and it will be good for a couple of days. But in my eyes, it's best served warm with a spoon of ice cream on top. You honestly cannot beat it. If you do try it out, please make sure you tag me at George's Cakes on Instagram because I love seeing you trying these recipes. In the meantime, subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment below with any other recipe suggestions that you may have. And we'll see you soon for more tutorials.